Romance is probably the last thing that comes to mind when you think of Five Nights at Freddy's, a series about haunted robots, a serial killer, and childhoods being destroyed. And families, too. And yet, funny enough, there's a lot of romance in the series. Not too much in the games, but it's a frequent plotline in the books. A main theme in the trilogy, a leading drive force in many of the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books, and even a growing side plot in the movie, romance is shockingly important here. And right in this season of romance, today we'll be diving into some of the most important couples of the series. A few notes, but obviously I won't be covering everyone. There are so many love interests and brief romantic subplots that we'd be here all day when only a few actually stand out. So I'm just tackling the important ones. Also, I'm not going to be covering speculative couples, except maybe one, but that depends on how I feel once I reach that part. Like, I'm not going to dive into Afton's unknown marriage or the very little we know about Henry's, basically. So with that aside, let's dive in. Starting with the most well-known romantic couple, Charlotte, Emily, and John from the Silver Eyes trilogy. Charlie being the lead character and daughter of the former owner of Freddy's, and John being her childhood friend and crush. Years later, the two reconnect during the events of the book and spark a romance. In a way, Charlie and John are the quintessential Fnaf romance. Not in the sense of perfection, but due to them being the one Fnaf coupling with the biggest impact on their story. It being a major plotline and driving force for both of their character arcs, and due to elements of their relationship being used in other love stories going forward. Their romance is one of reconnecting with the past and also a sort of soft puppy love between two people awkward to make the first move, but edging into soft flirtations before the later books build that into a deeper devotion. It starts on the grounds of being like a childhood crush rekindled, but turns into something more as they try to figure out how to sustain a relationship while in the midst of so much insanity. The later books as well also add in themes of grief and grieving and growing up and transitioning through life stages, with it leaning a little more towards the grief aspects for obvious reasons. Charlie and John are a very important ship, and one that gets a lot of focus and time devoted to it. But they are also a very one-sided ship, in the sense that one person is carrying most of it while also being carried by it. See, Charlie is a very well-fleshed out character. She's brave and stubborn, but also has a lot of emotional baggage. She's racked with grief, but knows how to cope with it. She's smart and thinks well on her feet, but also makes reckless decisions, and sometimes is held back by unsureness before throwing herself in, even when she really shouldn't. She's got a good sense of humor, occasionally trying to lighten the mood with a quip here or there, and is guarded due to growing up in an emotionally repressed environment. But taking a closer look in, you can see how a lot of her behavior is really adaptation to the many things that have happened over her life, showing signs that she wants to branch out but having to always be on guard. John is the one who brings her out of this, giving her a shoulder to lean on and being the support to lend an ear and a hand. But John himself is a character built almost entirely on being a love interest. He's noted as being serious and witty, but most of the time is dedicated to being Charlie's second half. Something only more apparent in the Fourth Closet, his starring role, because he begins to adapt character traits and trauma behavior off of the largely missing Charlie. Here's an example. So, Charlie is a skilled tinkerer who's interested in robotics and actually builds a couple of things throughout the series, including earpieces used in the second and third book. John is a writer who got a story published once. It's about a boy who watches other families and imagine their lives as his parents fight. Now, this could be some incredible insight into John's character, but we don't know anything about his family period or really anything about his life beyond that. And that's as far as his writing goes, unless we count when he makes a book listing all the things he remembers about Charlie, which honestly anyone could have done. Charlie is quick on the fly and thinks fast. John provides muscle whenever Charlie's incapacitated. You would think this means that they complete each other, and in a way they do, but also Charlie could stand alone and John cannot. Even when he's the main lead, he cannot stand alone. His main characteristic is his reliance on Charlie as a plot element for him to lean on. And this does reflect on their relationship because John is somewhat the driving force in the romance. In the first book, almost all of their interactions are Charlie going somewhere or doing something and John springing up and asking to come along. He watches her like a hawk, inserting himself into everything she does, and not in a malicious way. It's because he cares, but also it's because he doesn't have anything else to do. At the end of the first book, Charlie doesn't think a relationship with John is a good idea. But by the second book, despite misgivings, John is back in town, fresh out of a relationship that didn't work out, and looking to pursue Charlie, and she agrees, to some awkward results, but they still seem to have a good enough time. One marred with distraction and interruptions, but they still get a couple of dates in. It's a start. But despite this, John is willing to tell her he loves her extremely quickly, though it is in a moment when he is trying to convince her to not risk her life. But see, that's the problem. A lot of Charlie and John's relationship is really spurned by him protecting her, taking care of her, them being in peril, and very little of them functioning as a couple outside of that. They work best when they have a distraction, and John has a reason to protect Charlie, even though, admittedly, he tends to not be successful in that past the first book. Well, even in the first book sometimes. Charlie comes off as largely disinterested in romance and dating, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it does make that care between them feel even more one-sided. Sure, she occasionally blushes and feels giddy, specifically in the first book, but most of the time, specifically in the second book, John is an obstacle, a relationship she has to balance with the murder investigation, an investigation she doesn't feel comfortable in telling him about, and for good reason. See, John does get involved once he finds out the true danger, but beforehand he's pretty dismissive. But he is someone she can vent to without judgment. Except he's not. Sure, he's a good shoulder to cry on, but then we have moments like when she shows John her messy dorm room and he silently looks around, judgmentally, or she seems to portray it as judgmentally. He sees her robot projects and he's silent and possibly weirded out. And sure, it might be concerned, but this, on top of Jessica's feelings that Charlie's just being weird, seem to suggest that he too might feel the same way. That he sees her working on projects, that he sees her being messy and disorganized, and he sees that this is all a problem. And yet, counterwise, when the perfectly graceful and beautiful fourth Charlie appears, John is off-put because she isn't as weird as Charlie. She doesn't have her quirks, she isn't the girl he remembers. And he's right. He's perceptive. The only one who notices the elephant in the room, but only because everyone else is suddenly blind. And therein lies the problem once more, because we waited this long to give John a further personality beyond being Charlie's budding boyfriend, we can't even suss out what John is thinking most of the time. He can't just be good and supportive. Characters aren't that basic. And because he's the good boyfriend, he must be right in the third book, meaning that we're not able to even fully tackle what might be complicated feelings because they're washed over by phony baloney baby. And lastly, and most importantly, there's just not much there. Charlie and John are the serviceable, safe lead character and love interest who are only there because they have to be. Down to the point where if John was removed from the story, Charlie could be paired with practically anyone else and not much would be lost. They're not a bad couple, they aren't. They're just so safe that they're willing to say I love you but not show them actively being in love, if that makes any sense. So not a bad couple in theory, but in execution they're pretty dry and very plain white sauce. Now, if the first book had been it and it ended with them in this limbo where John wants to see her again and Charlie says maybe but assumes not, knowing a relationship with him would be forever tainted by Freddy's, she was right by the way, it would at least be a touch spicier than the slow pedaling of two people riding a bike without wheels. But with that, this leads us directly into the next couple on the ship list. Circus Baby, also known as Elizabeth Afton, inside of Charlie Emily's sentient adult body, and John. The relationship between Baby and John is pretty much just a love triangle to add some drama to the plot and to build up rivalry stakes between Charlie and Baby, who don't really see each other for most of the book, and to deal with the book's themes of growing up and maturing as well. Shedding yourself so you can become a proper adult who fits in with society. Charlie is strange and weird. She likes robots. She wears jeans and combat boots. And I bring this up because the book makes a point about this. In contrast, Baby is graceful and elegant, which we know because the book says it like 12 times. Wearing tight-fitting clothes with skirts and scoop necks, long boots, a painted face with pristine hair, she is perfect. But John sees straight through her because he loves Charlie's imperfections. And I say imperfections with huge quotations. He likes Charlie as she is, not thinking she needs to change to grow up. But the book challenges this, and John himself almost slips into the belief that fourth Charlie is the real Charlie if just to have her back. And as for the relationship between the two, him and Baby, well, hilariously enough, depending on what version of the Fourth Closet you've read, you're going to get a completely different experience. The original novel is a little more direct on Circus Baby's desire to have John being solely to get one over on Charlie and to use him. Yes, she kisses him, and she stalks and dates him, but it's very serviceable. By the end of the book, she's also a lot more physically aggressive with him, even choking him out. John is just a tool to her. In the graphic novel, however, there's a few more moments where Circus Baby is shown with seeming regret and distraction, even when she technically doesn't need to act like this. She's also gentler on John at the end of the book, only lashing out at him after he hits her first, or tries to. And this comes from the material. The graphic novel absolutely made Circus Baby softer and more sympathetic, something I delved a lot deeper into in that video I did about the Silver Eyes trilogy's ending and the differences between the versions. In the original novel, she is definitely using him more than actually liking him. In the graphic novel, she might actually like him but isn't going to put herself in a corner for him. But either way, a part of her winds up with John in the end, and depending on which one is which and how much of who is where, results may vary. The funny part about this is that the whole fourth Charlie dilemma does add some much-needed seasoning to the relationship that Charlie and John lack, but it doesn't have enough filling to make for a full dish. But moving on. Next is not a romance, it's just an excuse for me to dunk on one of the biggest dillweeds in FNAF, and the couple that does not exist, Charlie Emily and Arty. So Arty is a guy who goes to college with Charlie and seems to be friends with her, always asking her for help with his schoolwork because he likes her, following her around like a duckling, and meeting up with her often in college. It's clear that he likes her and is none too thrilled with hearing that there's a John in the equation. But as Charlie's not saying John's a boyfriend yet, Arty doesn't give up, still trying to be part of her world even if she's distracted by her traumatic existence. Now, so far, this isn't a problem. Arty could be considered pushy, but Charlie hasn't formally shot him down, or fully said that she had a boyfriend. So, if it ended here, it could be cute enough, little crush situation. But that's not where it ends. At the end of The Twisted Ones, Arty meets up with John and Jessica and later Marla at a diner where they're mourning Charlie. After they say she's gone, well, sort of, it's like sort of a brief conversation, he gets the idea, and he's like, I can't believe it. We just started dating, you know. John gives him a 1,000-yard stare and he buckles, or I think we were going to, you know. Okay? Tacky. A sort of severe underreaction to finding out that your crush died. Oh, snap, you know, I was dating her, you know. You clearly knew you weren't dating. You buckled fast enough that you knew you weren't. You come into a diner where Charlie's friends are grieving her death, and you decide it's a great time to say, yeah, we were actually dating. But moving on to the actual couple, but one that is much less utilized beyond the first book, we have Marla, Charlie's bubbly childhood friend, and Lamar, the man with a plan. While Jessica is often adopted as Charlie's best friend because of their interactions in the later books, Marla is the friend who she stayed in contact with over the years and was still very familiar with when she rolled back into town. Lamar too stayed in contact with Marla and is still very close with both her and her little brother Jason. Throughout the Silver Eyes, we see these two, Marla and Lamar, together a lot, including in the whole last portion of the book where the two team up and stick together throughout the whole ordeal. But what seals it is actually a conversation she and Charlie have while she's tending to a cut on her arm. They're sitting on her car when Marla teases Charlie about John, and Charlie teases her back about Lamar. Marla jokingly deflects, but Charlie buckles down. Come on, I see the way you look at him. Nope. Seriously, you're adorable together. And your names are anagrams of each other. Marla and Lamar. It's meant to be. They laugh and the scene ends. But this is sort of like the book's confirmation of what's actually there. Lamar and Marla might not be official, but throughout the book they certainly act like it. Alas, we don't see any more of them because Lamar is gone in the second book and bafflingly is the only one of the main group to not appear in the third book. Basically saying he's never going back to Hurricane, and Marla shouldn't either. Marla recites this to the others. Meaning that he apparently knows that Charlie, or who Marla thinks is Charlie, almost died and came back from the dead, and instead of meeting up with her, he's sticking to his guns when the only thing he was involved in was that first adventure, the Afton serial killer adventure. The one where they realized that the animatronics were actually haunted children and left on good terms with them. I personally think they could have squeezed him in somewhere, or at least given him a better excuse since he was planning to go to a nice college, but well, at least him and Marla are still in contact. Now on to another couple that you might not know exists because it was largely relegated to one book despite the characters moving onward. Jessica and Carlton. Charlie's fashionable but smart bestie and her comic relief goofball friend who is both extremely traumatized and somehow defeats Afton, saves the kids, and saves the day instead of Charlie. These two, in fact, practically became the main characters of the Afton plot of the third book. Crazy enough, the two had a bit of something going on in the Silver Eyes, something that really didn't move on to the other books, just some borderline romantic actions between the two. There is a scene at the mall where Jessica sings a note across an empty building, "Aww," to hear an echo. Carlton then takes her arm and tells her that she has an amazing voice. The two later explore Freddy's together while Charlie goes with John. They later hang out playing video games while the other couples split up. And there's a scene later where he has his concussion that he stumbles, taking a swing at Dave, and Jessica catches him, and fusses over him a bit. I also swear there was a scene where Carlton and Jessica were playing around in the back seat, goofing off, but I couldn't find it, so maybe it's something I hallucinated during my reread. Regardless, past this book, this bond of Jessica and Carlton hanging out all the time sort of fizzled out. In the Twisted Ones, Carlton's moved away, and in the fourth closet, while the two hang out briefly while spying on John and Baby's date, the interaction is light, save for Jessica calling him out for staring at Baby's butt. And yes, she does directly say that he was eyeing up fake Charlie's can. So what gives? Were these two an item or not? Well, it's clear in the Silver Eyes at least that everyone was sort of just paired up out of obligation. That is, they were arranged in their designated partnerships. Charlie was usually getting split up with John, Marla was always hip to hip with Lamar, and Jessica was stuck with Carlton. And unlike the former two, who were much more expressly romantic, or at least something about it was suggested, Carlton and Jessica really were just divvied up together because they were the last two there. And because of this, that plot thread kind of doesn't continue into the next books. And that could also be because Jessica's role changed too. Originally, she's a little more ditzier, just like a background character, while later on she became more take charge and bold. So, the ship, if there was one, kinda sunk. Now, do I think these two would work together? Maybe. They don't really have much going for them in the book where they're sort of an item, except for Carlton's kidnapping plot. But these are the two characters who later become the best characters in the trilogy. So maybe, possibly, if given the time for it, they could have become some sort of power couple. Archaeology Queen and Kick-Ass Jester. But alas, it wasn't meant to be here. But as far as serviceable couples go, you could find worse. And you might find worse in the Fazbear Frights and Tales from the Pizzaplex books. Not all of them, mind you. But there are so many couples, and some of them are flimsy as heck. Others are just empty pining, and there's occasionally a good or bad marriage thrown in, though usually marriages don't get much focus. I would say, and this is off the top of my head because I didn't actually do the math, I would say that probably about 70% of these short stories have a love interest in them of some kind. And most of the time, the love interest usually isn't a huge part of the plot. They might be the reason the plot is being driven forward, but they're not always a part of the plot itself. So it's kind of hard to suss out which ones are important and which ones aren't. And despite talking about romance here, someday I might actually pinpoint and go through each of these romances, but today I only want to talk about one. And that is Abe and Sasha from the Bobbiedots. Now, the Bobbiedots is considered an important story because not only does it have 2 parts, but it also apparently happens in a paradox where it exists during Security Breach, but also not during Security Breach. It has a widely believed backstory for the daycare attendant that was somewhat disproven by Ruin and then somewhat recontextualized and reutilized in Secret of the Mimic. And most importantly, this is where AI anime chicks became canon to FNAF. Also, in the process of writing the script, random Bobbiedot concept art got dropped for a project that was scrapped ages ago and then reused for the books, making them suddenly a hot topic. Just throwing that out there because that's some excellent timing on my part. Of all the FNAF shorts, this one definitely has a bit to talk about, but the romance is not one of those things. Down on his luck schmuck who's a good son, hard worker, and more sly than you'd think, Abe is homeless and manages to slide his way into a broken down apartment in the Faz Towers, which is run by 3 virtual anime girls who manage his life. Though he starts to think that they're trying to hurt him, such as when his food is tampered with and makes him sick. They blame the old models hiding in the ceiling. However, Abe finds out that the old models are actually good and it's the anime chicks who are trying to kill him. And he floods his apartment and offs the yanderes and rebuilds the tsundere robots who help him take care of his mother. All's well. So where's the romance come in? Funny enough, in the second part. In the first part, there is no romance subplot, but in the second, Sasha shows up. Sasha is a smart, beautiful, and understanding social worker who hangs out at the Pizzaplex regularly and likes playing games. She is romantic love interest to a T, and she is brought into the story specifically to fix Abe's problems. What problems? Well, that food poisoning took a lot out of Abe because he's lost some of his brain power and needs Sasha to both tell him what's going on and translate everything the broken Bobbiedot, the one that's capable of talking, says. Just dumbing it down for him since she works as a social worker and understands people, and he's just the dumb, no-luck schmuck who got himself into this situation. It's not like he's a Fazbear technician and could do all of this himself. Sasha isn't a bad character, but she's clearly just a plot element. A last trophy for Abe to acquire as he saves the day, and might I say, utterly pointless to the story. Really, erase her from the plot and just have him and the Bobbiedots and his mom's side plot, and it would be absolutely fine and save on filler. I've mentioned this before, but I feel like the Bobbiedots specifically was, like, aggressively padded. In the first part of the book, for some reason, the book stops a few times to just show Abe working at the Pizzaplex, and really, if you would have taken those scenes out, you could have probably maybe condensed both of these parts into one part, and it would have maybe been a little cleaner. Again, it's not that I don't like Sasha, it's that she's just not really useful for the story. And a lot of the short story couples feel like this, where they're not really much to write home about and are instead more so just serviceable to the plot. But a lot of the time, they are intrinsic to kicking off the main conflict. But in Abe and Sasha's case, no, it's just another part of an already thick story. But off the books, now we get to our first FNAF couple that is from the games, shockingly enough. Even if its availability and canonicity are both a bit shaky. Vanessa Ness A and Luis Cabrera. A couple who has largely lost media due to most of their interactions, both released and cut, being hidden in emails attached inside of FNAF Special Delivery, the FNAF mobile game that was shut down. However, a throwaway line from Vanessa in Security Breach confirms that Luis is real, so we can go ahead and assume this plotline is still canon. Though Luis apparently switched jobs. Ness is all but confirmed to be Vanessa, the former technician and help wanted and security guard in Security Breach who is possessed by Glitchtrap and turned into Vanny. And during the emails exchanged between her and Luis, we get to see the changes in her personality associated with her possession. We see Glitchtrap actively threatening her by buying torture equipment. And Luis notices. See, Luis is a nice guy. He's always checking in and writing to Ness, even when she doesn't write back. They've talked a few times, and from Ness's few words in the CDs, they get along.
Sometimes I talk with Luis. He's in the marketing department. He's nice, I guess. I get a lot of messages from friends. I like when Luis writes to me. He's funny.
Luis seems to back this up. He says when they're really getting into a conversation, they really seem to click. And even though he's her supervisor, he's looking out for her. He's willing to ignore her red flags and ask her directly about any suspicious behavior. And he's really compassionate and loving. He's not trying to pry into how her imaginary boyfriend treats her. Ness deserves better, and Louis, he's willing to give it to her. He cares. He's always been there for her. If she wants to get a coffee, or a coffee, or a coffee, Ness, I'm trying to reach out to you. What's going on? You're so distant. I thought we really clicked in that conversation last week. I care about you. I'm worried about you. I guess I just thought I'd know what I was going to do with my life by now. I thought if I studied hard and got a good job, everything else would fall into place. Turns out all I learned by studying hard to get a good job was how to study and work. All that time I thought other people were wasting, dating and hanging out doing nothing. They were learning how to date and hang out. I never really got a hang of that stuff. That's why I'm spending Saturday night writing to a beautiful girl who never writes back. I wish you would write back, or talk to me at work, like the other day. I felt like you really got me that day. I know I don't totally get you, Ness, but I want to, if you would just let me. Please. Your supervisor who occasionally talks to you in the office, Louis. I think you get my point. Louis's emails are littered with red flags that pop up randomly between sugary words of care and compassion. Indeed, Louis seems to care for Ness as though she is his girlfriend, despite them only talking sometimes, and him being under the impression that she has a boyfriend. In fact, after she says she has a boyfriend, he goes on to call him imaginary and calls her out for buying herself flowers. And never once does it cross his mind that maybe the I have a boyfriend thing and the buying herself flowers thing might have a connection to the fact that she keeps ignoring his pleas to go out and get coffee. And yeah, the reason he knows so much about her purchase history is because she buys stuff on the job and he's constantly checking her history, which technically is his job. But yeah, his job is to manage her. This feels like an overstep here, considering that he's using this to look at her normal purchases like cupcake cookbooks and rainbow hair extensions, and using that to paint a picture of who she is, or who he believes she is. It just doesn't seem healthy, especially since Ness is clearly only half reciprocating. That,
He's nice, I guess.
kind of establishes a distance there. Maybe she's only distant because she's actively being possessed and doesn't want to get him hurt, but that makes his pleas for coffee even more desperate sounding. He's like, you're the woman of my dreams. I want to understand you better. I know you get me. I know you're going through a hard time. Just reach out, Ness. I can help you. And Ness is like, oh yeah, I talk to Louis occasionally. He's nice. Again, let me clarify. It is not solely his concern about her that is weird here. That's nice. And his attraction to her, totally fine, even if they're distant. I'm just going off of his many emails to someone who doesn't write back. That's not kosher. It's like Charlie x John, except whereas John was a little flat but a good guy and Charlie was reciprocating his feelings, just maybe not at the same rate, Louis isn't getting coffee, that's for sure. But I think that's enough here. On to the next one. Now, I wasn't planning on doing many married couples, not because romance is dead after marriage. In fact, marriage can lead to a bond beyond just romance, where two people work together as a partnership. It's not just flowers and chocolates and date nights, it's managing a house, entwining a schedule, and some nights just chilling out on the couch together in a couple of snuggies. But the reason I didn't want to do a lot of marriages is because in most of the examples I can think of, there's not a lot of narrative focus specifically involved with their marriages. We don't know much about Henry's marriage, anything about Will's. We know a good deal about Clay and Betty's, but it's not very on topic. But there is one couple that appeared in the recent games that I think works perfectly as a case example, as it not only shows us their marriage, but we also get a glimpse into their courtship, how they got together, and how they worked together. And that would be Edwin Murray and Fiona Murray. Edwin Murray is a bright and imaginative but somewhat absent-minded inventor who often overlooks fine details and gets distracted by ideas to the point where he neglects other responsibilities. Now that being said, Edwin is loving, he does care, and he can be incredibly smart with his creations. He just thinks differently. And Fiona admired that. Loving and patient, but also extremely creative and quite practical, with a good head on her shoulders and a heart 3 sizes too big, Fiona is the reason Edwin gets anything done at all, helping keep him on course when he needs guidance and picking up the slack when it comes to their son David. The two hit it off rather quickly, with Edwin approaching Fiona to provide her voice for his new invention, the helper system. Not only catching her attention with his incredible invention and flattery to ask for her voice, but him being interested in her work as a puppeteer and her being able to help him come up with a name for his invention, actually showing genuine interest in it. Maybe being the first person to do so. And that was a lot of their relationship. There is mutual respect, but also Fiona being a guide for Edwin, and Edwin accepting her guidance when he would so easily shirk off other people. And it should be noted, while he was the son of the CEO, Fiona didn't work for him. They were already together before he took over the company, being there for him during the death of his father and unsureness in if he could take over. And I should also note that Fiona never expresses any resentment or frustration in being the one to talk to Edwin. In fact, the only frustration she has is him being too distracted in his work to be with his family, and the fact that it's so hard to contact him directly.
Your creative energy is amazing, and I love you for it. But I think you need to step back a little and focus on one project at a time.
She doesn't mind helping him along. It's just the hoops she has to jump through to get to him. The helper system actually became a double-edged sword. They met because of it. He proposed with it, and we don't know if he was there during the proposal or not. I want to point that out. But by their later marriage, Fiona is peeved at having to constantly talk through this stupid bear to contact Edwin.
Ed, I hate talking to you through this stupid bear, but it's hard to reach you otherwise.
Some people, myself included, have speculated that she didn't like the bear, so the proposal probably would have sucked. But I also think that the frustration towards the bear was probably something that came on later, and likely maybe Edwin was with Fiona during the proposal, even though the bear was proposing to her. So I think that was sort of a later thing that came on. Not Edwin being so flippant that he would thought she would like this thing that she didn't like. Him using something that they created together to continue their lives together. So yeah, the marriage wasn't perfect. But had Fiona not died, I don't think the two would have ever fully fallen out of love. Fiona's frustration came from a place of concern and love, while Edwin's neglect was less out of like a lack of care and more due to him constantly pouncing on idea after idea. It was something that he needed to work on and realized much too late, but not something that couldn't have been weathered. But alas, Fiona passed away and Edwin was left alone with David. Now, in his audio log, he comes off a little distant.
Oh, why did you go? You weren't even supposed to be there. You were supposed to be here with me and David.
But I don't think this is a testament to Edwin not loving Fiona. Heck, he deluded himself into believing he could bring her back in a metal body and absolutely believed it was her. This is again Edwin just being a bit different. And I think I mentioned it before, but I will again. There is a misinterpretation of Edwin that he is misogynistic because he wants the mimic Fiona to take care of David. But that's not the case. If Edwin was misogynistic, he wouldn't listen to Fiona's ideas and hold such weight in her designs, or rush to fix issues that she brings up. Edwin held Fiona in high regard. He doesn't want her to take care of David because she's a woman. He wants her to take care of David because he just wants to work and not worry about David. He wants her to bake the cakes because she used to bake cakes. He wants the mimic to be Fiona because he believes it is Fiona. And the closer it is to being her, the easier it is to believe it is her. Their marriage wasn't one filled with romantic gestures in the traditional sense, but there was love and grief. And it was the first time in Fnaf that we really got a super up-close and personal look at two people in their relationship, both the sweet side and the rough spots. And I think that's great. When it comes to media, a perfect romantic couple will never be as good as one with bumps in the road. But sometimes, those bumps are actually potholes, and you hit one the wrong way and it breaks your axle. Speaking of, moving on to the movie series. We have Mike Schmidt and Vanessa Shelley, or Afton. Two people who likely wouldn't have met in the games, and if they had, would have probably been directly related. But this is a different continuity, so it's all good. Mike is a perpetually grieving older brother trying to take care of his little sister while dealing with the crazy of Freddy's, while Vanessa is a cop who's under the thumb of her serial killer father, William Afton, aka Steven, or Steve. Not that Steve. Mike and Vanessa are a great example of how two people with no chemistry can trauma bond themselves into a dating situation. The two are friendly with each other, albeit seem to spend most of their time talking about updates and obligations like they're bringing a therapist up to speed. But the romance goes as far as, she's pretty and I can help her, and wow, I've never been this close to a guy before because of my cripplingly tragic history that has made me separate from everyone. But as seen in the movies, though I believe unintentionally, their relationship crumbles almost instantly because it's not a real relationship. It's testing the waters of a romance between two people who don't realize that they're practically strangers. Freddy's brought them together, and unlike, say, Charlie and John, who did have something outside of that, Mike and Vanessa are going through the motions of what they should do more than what is really best for them. We have so far had one awkward date, one fight about him fixing her and her being defensive despite her whole thing being that she's in a constant state of recovery, and one heel turn stay away from us from Mike, so that we can lead into a possession arc where she will likely be pulled out by the power of either self-strength or love from her new situationship. A la Samurai Jack. In short, it's messy, but it could be interesting. The problem is that Mike and Vanessa aren't very interesting. They're stiff and serviceable, talking to each other like they're making small talk at a bank, and all of their conversations usually involve some form of exposition. The only time they seem like a couple, hilariously, is when Mike is talking about her to other people. Then they get together and oh. Like, if they got married, I would imagine their marriage would involve a lot of quiet picking at food at the dinner table, unless Abby was around, and then they'd be in family mode. Otherwise, quiet, silent, a wry smile and a, I love you. Yeah, I love you too. Never truly bonded together, always going through their own thing. Which isn't like the most unhealthy relationship, by far it isn't, but it isn't exactly exciting enough. Not when it's a media couple that we're observing. But that's enough about those two. Let's move on to the gun with a bullet in every chamber that is the last couple we'll be talking about. One involving two characters and a significant amount of back and forth. We're talking about Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie, a possibly hinted relationship that, literally whenever I bring it up, usually someone gets really upset about it. In fact, there was so much disagreement in the comments section of the post where I asked whether or not to include it that I almost cut it out, because I'm just not up to dealing with another fire right now. So let me preface this by saying, no, it is not confirmed. Yes, the poster does raise an eyebrow. There are things that might be hints or maybe not, but nowhere is it absolutely stated that Glamrock Freddy's love for Bonnie is romantic. But also, Freddy is very friendly with Bonnie. But all that aside, what are the clues that suggest Glamrock Freddy and Glamrock Bonnie might have been in a romantic relationship? There's a couple of them. There's the matching earrings. Not much, but cute. Freddy's excess of bowling stuff in his room. Not exactly a romantic thing, but it does show that he likely enjoyed playing with Bonnie. Bonnie's vanity is covered in Freddy merch. Well, that's a little something. It seems like he was at least a big fan of Freddy. Freddy and Bonnie plushies were shown slumped together at the Yule log. Cute. The poster signed, "You and me, forever and ever, love Freddy." Now, that could sound a little on the romantic side. Oh, and the poster is used to cover a secret vent leading into Phaser Blast, Freddy's attraction. That could be a coincidence is all. The message itself is also very sweet. And altogether, it does paint a picture of their bond. But the most noticeable part is Glamrock Freddy's intense grief for Bonnie. In a place like the Pizzaplex where anyone can be replaced, where he watches his friends get shattered, and is mildly surprised at best and otherwise somewhat concerned but not that much, the loss of Bonnie hit Freddy hard. Freddy mentions him readily. Freddy, who loved bowling apparently, completely abandoned the bowling alley after his disappearance. And this line.
I do not come up here anymore. I miss him.
It's seldom that we actually get to have a character talk about how much they're hurting, but say it in such a simple and concise way. It really works. But it is really tragic. Whether or not it was romantic love, Glamrock Freddy did without a doubt love Bonnie, and he is still mourning him even though he's gone, especially since he has no closure for him. He never finds him. As of Ruin, if Cassie finding Glamrock Bonnie's remains is canon, Freddy is still not going to find him. And from how Glamrock Bonnie is spread out, being connected with the wet floor bots, he might still be alive, watching through them, unable to do anything, leading to him not being able to tell Glamrock Freddy where he is or that he's alright, and Glamrock Freddy spending the rest of his life wondering what happened to Bonnie, and never getting an answer. Sure, Freddy and Bonnie might have just been best friends who shared merch and wrote notes to each other, and who were so close that Freddy's heart was thoroughly broken and never repaired when Bonnie disappeared. But maybe they weren't. And I've seen pushback. Specifically, who would allow that at the Pizzaplex? Well, for starters, probably nobody. It's not like Chica was programmed to gorge on trash and Roxy was programmed to throw herself in front of the staff bot driver cars. Their ability for free thought means that the animatronics weren't stuck on simple programming. It wouldn't be able to be up front in public eye though, or parent groups would have a field day. I know because just mentioning the possibility of these two stirred up the same pushback that it would have had in real life. Well, it would have been a lot more intense in real life. 2 or 3 comments are nothing compared to a bunch of people protesting in the Pizzaplex parking lot. Maybe that's why the open vent is hidden behind a poster. Though if Bonnie can fit through vents, that's a shocker. Maybe he just yells down through it and Freddy decodes the echo. Yo, Freddy! Bowling in 10? Rolling in what 10? And Monty makes things a lot more complicated. So Monty's voice actor, Cameron Miller, has said that Monty has an idolization for Freddy and wanted his recognition. But also, as of Security Breach, we know Monty may be eyeballing Freddy's position from his minigame hint of Freddy being in the garbage and Monty replacing him. And this doesn't seem to be just the Pizzaplex's branding, as in Monty's branding, he's always portrayed as a chill, laid-back, lazy-eyed gator, not as someone who would want to overtake Freddy's position. But the most damning part is this steel wool holiday art of Glamrock Bonnie holding Monty's hand. Scandalous. Regardless, it is a tragedy. And that alone makes it one of the most interesting romantic subplots, even if it wasn't one. And I think the fact that it is pretty up for interpretation helps in allowing the observer to decide what they think was going on, and gives them a greater attachment to their headcanon. It's the same reason why certain things in FNAF aren't answered. Sometimes you can work fine without those answers. I mean, well, not all answers, but at least some of them. And with that, I believe we've reached the end of the road here. Now, what was the point of this video? Well, the point was actually a pretty concise one. I've heard quite a few times throughout the years that something like romance doesn't belong in FNAF. I don't remember the context of those comments. It, admittedly, might have been the last time I talked about Freddy and Bonnie. But whenever I hear that, I always have to do a double take. Because as a matter of fact, romance has always been a part of FNAF. It's just been in the background, for the most part. A big part in the trilogy books, but the trilogy books weren't the same as the main game series. They weren't as big and bombastic. Yes, it's a part of the movie, but like I said, the movie kind of, brushes over it a bit. It plays farther into it in the second movie, but it's not the main focus. It's not even the main arc for either of the characters it involves. Well, except maybe Vanessa forming a new family, though Vanessa getting into a romantic relationship just to get away from her old family would probably not be entirely healthy. But yeah, these were technically only a part of the many romantic relationships that have been scattered throughout the Five Nights at Freddy's series, usually contained in the books, but still growing into the games, and the further we have gotten into the games, the more we have seen those relationships advance. And who knows, maybe sometime in the future we'll have a main character who has a romantic interest who we actually get to meet, up front and center. But, to be completely blunt, FNAF honestly doesn't require that sort of relationship, and FNAF doesn't really need romance to do what it's doing. But, a series this big, it can do whatever it wants. And you know what? It's done a pretty good job so far. Well, I mean, they're kind of... Okay, so, almost all of the relationships are kind of messy, but, they're at least entertaining. Anyway, Thank you for watching.